So the particular lift of your back in this position is to support kind of the entry, the gateway into the circulation in the frontal layers of the bones. So as you sit on your block, which is in front of your bolster, which is across the mat, and you feel kind of that, well, it's a very small perspective of your, like your pelvis is just basically kind of on this little elevator. It's on its first floor. And so when you move the flooring back, right, you're feeling the floor has come up into the body. So I want you to separate your feet on the sides of a wide block. And then as you use your hands on the bolster, I know some of us, our arms are longer, so our hands might be behind the bolster, but you guide yourself back with a tad of core response. So you might feel that the core gets a little bit brick-like when you lower back or shaky. But as you center back, feel that lift of the pelvis that's on the bolster, right? It's pretty comfortable. If you have barely any sensation on the block, that's great. I want that block to be something that still lifts up the buttocks, but not anything too high, nothing higher than the bolster. So situate your blanket so they feel as if they're a flat, very comfortable, satisfying support. And then we'll put our feet on top of our block and you'll push it forwards and then let the heels rest on top of that block. So I like to have my heels so they kind of slide and they hook on the other side of the block. I like that pull for that portion of my Achilles. I feel like it's a very helpful length for that bone that doesn't get much support during the day. If it starts to feel a little touch and go with that part, you can always put your feet just simply on the block, but you could try. Add a sandbag on the upper lids of the legs and kind of feel how the sand supports your back. So I feel some kind of funny sensations that have to do with my very low back into the pelvis, kind of the arch. But if those sensations feel difficult in your back muscles, what you need to work with is maybe scooting back a bit on the bolster so that everything kind of pulls in, right? Like shrink wraps a little there. So be careful on how the back responds before you settle in. If you have sand to the thighs or if you prefer sand on the ribs, take a moment to make that decision. Decision-making central here. Okay, and then grasp a hold of your belt and feel the hands closely together and then gradually feel the elbows opening and slide your hands so they are very lightly slipping on the belt until you create an openness with the chest, armpits, and your hands are holding the belt, but they're resting on the floor. So there is an observance of circulatory experience in the chest walls. And then still make a decision, is the sandbag in the right spot? And once you slide the weight around in your upper body, that changes how the organs respond to the breath. And then let's start to center with this elongating front spine with a mixture of structural support and easing tension via the breath pace. So abdominally breathing, filter the air through the nose and feel both the experience of lifting the torso with the in-breath and exhaling out of your mouth. Simply emphasize the in and the out breath with mild coaching with your core. So see what happens organically without force. And where you spend your mental energy processing awareness that you're creating for your body. So we want to turn on the body's natural healing capacity. So this would be a time to begin maybe with as little interruption as you can in your environment, as minimal. And then gauge how you feel with the props. You might decide, well, I want to put my feet on the floor and let the knees point up for a moment and see how my back continues to release that way. Or maybe you push the blocks or the block as far forward as you can, so the heels are on top, not over the edge. But the feet on the block will be helpful for your back circulation, but there's also some element of the legs, right? They're draining out, they're still elevated, right? They're not the lowest part of you. And what I hope is the lowest part, if you were to look at the whole experience of sensation, would be the arms. And the circulation in the arms really opens the lungs. So a few more moments in this type of circulation. And then when you're ready to add on, we all get to take our own time for this shift. You can maintain this pattern for a while. And those of you that are comfortable moving your feet together and knees out, you might try that. So there's a few waves of movement, moving any sand if it's on the thighs, or keeping it on the ribs. And then stepping off of that block so that the knees point, and then they point out. So feeling how you guide your feet together and that motion of the knees outwards. And can you work without creating a full pose? See if you can let it be gradually shifting, your feet touching and they're pushing together. And then energetically feel that press of the feet together and the chest open, elbows wide. Yeah, because typical habit is the chest is moving forward during the day and the feet are not together, right? They separate the balance in the spine. So work with this deeper balance for the moment in your back muscles, your inner thigh muscle, adductors, and then see if that flesh of the core will soften a bit. Soft belly, movement with breath. Okay, now when you're ready to let go of the belt entirely, let the arms gradually move out, maybe a little downwards, and then experience the inhale filling the lungs. The belly expands, and out breath, feeling the abdomen come back to neutral. Shoulders squeezing back. You know, with your brain and the neck connection, so that it is really heavy and resting on the blankets. Okay, so when you shift your knees to point up, you've moved from that inner webbing of the leg, which is interesting to think of. Go back to the knees out maybe for a moment and connect these layers, these webs. You've got kind of, as a human being, as just a human being, you got these kind of the web of the armpit, the chest, armpit, chest, right? That's a kind of a web that tends to be closed in, right, in the day. A lot of lymph in there. And then same thing here, right? It is have a different sensation because of the stomach closer, right? But we want to work in this path where we move the knees in, But then as we separate the feet, I want you to almost kind of wag your tail a little bit right to left or vice versa, so that that balance comes into the sacroiliac space. So thinking about the space at the base of your bolster towards your block. For me, it's just my bolster. But I want that to separate and relax. And these webbings, right, inner thigh, armpit, is a good place to bring some attempted circulation in this next part. So when you push down into your feet, you're going to lean a little bit towards the side so you can slide that block away. Keep the rear off the ground when you remove the block. And you might want to bring it, let's see, bring it overhead, the block. You never know what's coming next in this sequencing, huh? So I'm going to start to scoot my tush downward. So I'm kind of sliding towards my feet, knees pointing up. And then as I feel this arch in the back, take immense care to roll to the left, but we're going to come into a sleeping sage pose first. So it's very calming for the back out of that position. So the left thigh is close to the bolster, but on the floor. And then when I turn, I let my left rib cage shift open to the left side and then move my arms down. And I like to have this where the blanket rolls up a little bit on that to the quarter fold is now, I guess it's a little bit smaller, it's a wad. And then I turn my head to the left, to the right side. So the arms are in an opposite action, right? They're the comfortable action for most of our shoulders. But feel when you're here that the chest, if it's being pushed into the bolster, you can actually try to reach onto the other side or move your blanket so you have space for your chest. But use the bolster to place circulation into your organs here. So feeling the weight of the brain heavy. Maybe you have a turn in the neck that feels comfortable here to the right. Some of us might go to the left. And now with the back, getting some nice hydration from the last position, right? We're swirling around the back muscles. So scan the focus below the back of your heart, right? So you might feel that that's turning. Now we're making this a little bit more activating. We're not going to be here for any longer time, but I want you to at least have had that experience of the twist for a few. And then push your hands down, lift up, use that awareness of turning towards your blankets, and then turn the blankets. So they're going to twist themselves. They don't twist themselves, but turn them so they're across the mat horizontal like your bolster. Have your block on the other side. And then if you haven't already added something on the inside of the right knee, this might be a good time to add a block or a cushiony responsive ball, because that surface is a little bit different than a block, or a towel. You can use either. And when you start to layer down into side sage, that connection from our hip, but also this, the lateral rotators, right? This tensor fascia, which is really what it is actually called, TFL. So when I lean down into my left side, you'll place that sand on any area that feels like it's enjoying that support. And I guess enjoyment might come in time with this pose once you settle in. If you have a circular round bolster, you might prefer that for this position. So if I put that sand on that side, and then as I reach the right arm up, feel when it goes to ceiling and to beyond, overhead. With a block idea of destination can be helpful for some of us. For some, it might not be useful, especially when you touch down if it violates right in the shoulder. So if you feel a shoulder violation, then you'll know it's best to bring your arm maybe on your side body or closer to your left arm. But why not feel how the waist has its own natural arch? I always find that kind of interesting, how we talk about our arching through the movement of the spine, but it also is like the waist, you know, there's so much in that area as far as the organs that I guess our mobility there is limited until we kind of give it some intelligence and thought. So come into your shape, and we'll pause on the word program here and breathe. Levelize the concentration with your eyes, perhaps closing them. And if there's discomfort in a waist part or the back of the waist, then you'll want to move the right arm till you feel like, oh, that's comfortable. You're messaging into your nervous system that you're able to breathe comfortably, lower tension from that breath phase, slowing it down, elongating, but slowing down the pace. Yeah, be sure your head is comfortable. So if turning your head a little towards the ceiling, you feel just a light amount of pull in the side of the neck closer towards the back of the ear, you might want to kind of adjust those bones by letting your head really truly relax on its left ear. You can probably lean into an ear, right? Not grinding into the blanket, but feel what part of your brain touches down. Right, that could take us a good 30 minutes to study that touchdown with the brain, but for now, our ribs are moving with the breath. Great, few more moments. Okay, we're going to study the hip today with this layer. So be present with how the right side, the whole side, right? Not just the leg part, but up into the waist. And just like we do things like cat-cow, right? We round and arch the back. Feel if there is any reality of that type of perspective here. You can kind of rock a little bit side to side, kind of some motion, especially when you have a bolster under you. You can use that as kind of a pad that you push into. You make little prints into it from the left side of the rib cage to the back side of the rib, which really goes to the sides of the spinal column, right? So this one would be one that you might want to add to it, you know, almost a daily practice, just to lie into, put sand, make sure your head is relaxed so you can even rest in it for time. So that the time creates that traction and loosening of these fibers. But working with them, when we come up, I'm going to kind of shift this process so that when you feel the turn to your left now, I want you to slide your sand away, keep it near your right hip. And then as you begin to come around to your left hand back behind you, remove the ball or block, bring your knees together, and then place your blankets directly behind your bolster, okay? Block comes back into the front. And we'll turn and sit on the bolster, but cross the legs, right foot forward of left knee or shin, and then placing the seat. So it's like, it's as broad as you can make your, not just your seat, but the flesh of the thighs, right? You want to kind of take a wide seat. Fill up your bolster. Okay. Then we put a sandbag on the right thigh. If you're a little bit uncertain what this will feel like and you're not so convinced yet, you can go without the sand, right? So if you're not feeling that that's going to help your back, take the sand away. And we'll take the blocks and place them to the top left zone by your right foot. And then filter to the left. And as you lower down, we're going to work with that right side body that we were recently stretching, right? So this side chamber, when we were lying on the left, was getting kind of strong and elongated. The strings of the fibers, right? The fascia was elongating. But now we're trying to kind of wrangle in towards getting a hip energetic going on. So if this is too much on, let's say, your back muscles, you're not really finding you're privy to this, you put your blocks in the front instead of to the left, right? Still going to maybe even be more comfortable for your hip. Okay, so find either left or to the front. Filter into this, let your back present a focus of maybe the arch or the neutral, or some of us are going to really want to go into that cat spine, right, for the moment. So filter into that space behind your heart. I've got a thing for that. Something about that. Okay, so that right hip. I think you're feeling into your right hip. Okay, so when you do pull the blocks back in, okay, we're going to take the blocks out to the sides. And then as I come upright, I'm going to move the sand off for a moment and place the left foot forward of the bolster, knee pointing up, just step it forward, you're still seated. And then lift the right foot and cross it to that left knee. But here's where you might find, wait a minute, sitting up is challenging. My spine is feeling a little iffy. So you could put your hands back on the blankets, turn the hands out, not just the fingers. I guess the whole hand has to go too. But you could lean a little back and move your shoulders back. But let that right hip kind of work its way through the inner track of the legs. And this kind of adds a leg to it, right? Not so much the waist, the side, but it adds the knee as well. This is where I start to notice my knee. So sliding the left foot forward will make it a little bit more controllable around points of the inside of the knee. And it may feel kind of basic for your hip influence. So give it a few more moments. Yeah, you could be up a little higher if this feels better for you. You could sit very tall without your hands back and hold just below the left knee as well, a little more intense. And pull towards that leg. So that would be your second offering to your hip offering. Hip offerings, here we come. Now, as you bring your hands down and you cross the leg. Okay, so however you are in the sitting zone, sitting as open with the seat, right? This is a challenge, right? To keep the sitting bones still gauged open, especially the left one, when you hook the right foot across. And then add a sandbag to the left thigh. And start with position 1, which is to hold the right knee and center up. So I have a moment of lifting in my upper zone. And then turn right and left arm, the whole arm to the outer side of that right leg and twist. Okay, so it may be semi-obvious for you to see what I'm doing with the right side of the torso, but what I'm working with is this turn. So the waist, right, as you know it, you're kind of eclipsing through this torso. So you want to feel the rib cage kind of pulled, and there's always further to go, right? The furthering is with the exhaling. So capture that inhale and then feel when you twist the dedication of the arm to support your shoulder, and it braces the shoulder in the back. So if the arm this way doesn't work, you can hold the leg and still work with that rotation. The area that we're eventually wanting to feel is the hip on the twist. But that seems to be the last experience that people start to have with their twist. It's like the more intermediate stage of maybe consciousness in the direction. So feel where you turn with your torso and feel where you sit firm with both sitting bones. That might be the key, is to like let the seat just be a seat, not try to pull it up like you're holding it, in the pelvic floor. It's like you're trying to relax your pelvic floor in this pose. That for me is a little different for my hip. And now we're going to come back forward. It's not a forever twist. Take off that sand, and then we'll come back with the right leg behind us and to a Cockatossen pigeon pose. So the left knee is open. And now I want you to take your blocks. Door number 1 is under your elbows to the front, and you can go into door 2 anytime you feel, which would mean to move our blocks over towards the right side. Okay, so that's a little more in the left hip. And if your back was just feeling a little bit of extra compression, this is a good decompressive shape. So a lot of the things we just did were kind of fast cycles through teasing around the hip. It is kind of a tease for the hip where we've moved. And hopefully we'll get through it. Okay. So let the weight of your arms help you guide the movement of the spine. So I let my back move a little with the breath, maybe some cat-cow motion, spine, arch, and round. Yeah, the blocks could be right side or to the front. Let the left leg tell you where to go with the blocks. And now, how does the pelvic floor respond? Is it still kind of on a crash course to tighten? Or can you feel how important it is to let it relax? But all these muscles that you're working around it are going to help you create more control, right? Without having to create nervous system tension. So we're working on the bands around the hips. Now, final step here would be to bend the back knee and to feel if you can bring that bent leg so the foot moves towards the rear. Even if your quad is a little jammed up, or it just feels like it's got a lot of, stiff layers, you might draw the foot in, but the one thing you want to be a little careful is not to swing the foot back and forth, because that's like a knee danger zone. Most of the time, if you're in a prone position, right? If I swing my knee side to side in this position, I can only imagine. I don't want to do more than that. Okay, so feel where the hip layer is experiencing, because this is the side we're going to stretch in our sage pose next, this left side. Okay, now stay with the elbow form forward and down. Okay, you've all been in a pigeon pose where you push up and you arch. But here, see if you can let the back feel a little bit more of that cat spine. So elbows press and spine is slightly lifting. Like you have a little back umbrella. Okay, now as the back umbrella kind of flows down. Okay, now start to move your weight into your left side of the lower bones, the leg. And as you kind of creep your hands in, you might move your block so that your load is low in your arms. And then as the weight gets heavy on that left hip, you're going to swing the right leg forward and come into cobbler's pose, feet together, knees open, and hands on the floor right besides your feet. So you can look at your wonderful hands and feet, right? As if they spend a lot of time this close together. And consider the broadness across the rim from SI joint to SI joint, right? And that rim, you want to feel the knees moving out. Okay, versus the position of press, press, press down. Feel them moving open. And that's it. They don't need to be positioned pushing. So feel them expanding. Okay, now as your hands move up to the inner thighs, right? Kind of feel this thigh connection. And then as I start to sit upright, this inner thigh process might be able to lower down a little bit. That's kind of a fun way to go with this one, is to be forward and then come up to sitting. And then feel if your knees do go outwards. They will go down at some point, or they'll take their time. But the thing with the knee opening, okay, is we want to keep this inner knee space, right? Especially this line, it's open, not tightening up. So if you've learned putting like a little hand towel and just kind of wrapping it into a roll and sliding it inside that crease, it's great to help the knees. It's an overall good knee stuff to do. So if you practice a little of this, might be a good, like, to make a 20-minute home practice that has some of these things in for knee health. But that's a good one to do, to use the support. So I want you to grab a hold right at that crease. So you're trying to keep that open. The base of the inner thigh, when you draw a line and right to the knee crease so it's open. And that's it. We're not trying to force anything. It's just open. There's no force. Okay. Now with that move of the knees going up, now I push out through the feet and I reach through the heels. Maybe the toes span out because they like to celebrate being like that. But feel the back of the legs trying to open up without jamming them down. So just open them up. And the thighs are kind of electrified at this point, right? There's some awareness, a current moving in the legs. And then hands on bolster. Push down and slide your seat off the bolster. Get a belt behind you, probably. Wrap it around the feet, bottoms, and bring the hands so that they're holding besides your upper legs. So you slide it back and then feel if you can push and then lift up the legs. Okay, and obviously this is a workout for your whole nervous system where we're going through. So really clutch onto the belt today for this one, as if you are using your muscles in the upper body to hold the upper body accountable. So use your biceps, like they should feel like there is, with like a 20-pound, not that you're going to do a bicep curl that way, but they have some weight in them, like your body weight. Okay, and then feel if your upper body leans back at all. That's okay if it does. If it doesn't, I would try to push your feet forwards. Feels like you're muscling a little bit with this. Warming up. Good. Okay. All right. So bend through the knees. And then get a feel of your feet pressing forward, straight forward from the navel, knees bent. And then as you lower down into your heels, you're going to slide the belt away. And now as you turn to that twist on the second side, if you prefer a ball on the inside of the left knee, take that. But I want you to take that turn to the right hip, right? So it's the right hip down, and you can move your blanket as I am, or prefer any direction you want. But as you lower down, you have a little bit of a turn. So your head turns left or right, and the waist has this nice openness in the back flesh. And you might be reflecting, right? Your flesh reflecting on the last shape, the boat pose. And then as you come into this kind of recovery shape. So let the spine feel that turn, feel the weight of your head, and relax your neck. Now begin to push and lift up and come into side sage. So if you can move your props pretty comfortably across the blankets, move. And then as you lie into that right side, access your sand on top of the exterior left side, and then extend that left arm. Maybe you use a block overhead, depends on the last side. If you explored that, it's not required. Some people don't find it helpful. So if it is useful for you, take the prop and then use that as a guide, a force of focus, kind of a guidepost, right? Sometimes having that at the top, I feel like it starts me into an exact science of movement, but then I might change it up. I might move my arm out, and I might move my arm way open and stay with that. Some people will bring their left arm out and even touch the floor to the side, right? So a very nice armpit chest stretch. But how about that flesh again? That's the armpit chest and the adductor, right? So the inner thigh. So that right knee is drawing up to the bolster. It's next to it, besides the bolster. And then this hip layer. Be a little careful how you pressurize your sand on your hip, because it might get a little wonky with your knee. It might kind of set it back. And you want to feel like the knee is really in a safe space, the left knee. So spend a moment getting yourself set here for a good 12 to 15 breaths. And then as you flush the body on the side chamber, and let's say you're really interested in this hip circulation on this one, you might find it useful to have no sand. Sometimes that's a disruption. And let that leg really kind of reach back and feeling that the fibers, right? That's under the fascia, right? Feel kind of that connective tissue kind of innervated, right? Sometimes using less props might be useful on that one. Or you come back to the ball. Fine tune the rib movement with your breath. It's generally settling for the nerves. Okay, so a few more moments. Now the left arm is the free range extension, right? It's your arm extension, the extremity that can move. The left leg can move, but it is limited, isn't it? Because how your hip is touched down, right? With the bolster in the wedge of the waist. So the waist wedge would be something to really take some time to study, how we use the bolster as a waist wedge. And then the opposite side, right, can stretch the hip because of this wedge. So use your bolster wedges often to get the waist to stretch. You can do that lying on your back or even face kind of sort of face forward, but in like child's pose or belly on the bolster. So this left side, now we're gonna roll to the right side, and then as you come up, I want you to forget this focal point with this left side. And when I come up to sit, I first thought about doing this until we began a little bit of conversation with the side layer. It was going to start, we come up from that into the seated pigeon. But I like the idea of this left side continuing. Now, one other way you might consider this if you were just kind of in your own, you are in your own practice, right? You could wander with this, would be that you could take the block or so and to the right and like let this left side keep stretching. That's one way to go with it. It comes up usually the second side for me when I think of those things. So you can play with that. The idea with the blocks though in the front right side or in the very front would be to produce, right, this inner thigh openness and then start to move centrally into the hip. But I can tell that this might be a smart move too, to go to the right blocks or to sit upright and stretch the right arm on the block and left arm over. So however you work with one of those three positions, either block besides your bolster, right arm down, left arm over, or two blocks to the side and leaning into the blocks, or the blocks in the very front, right inside the mat. Either of those or any of those will likely produce some circulation in your hips and your waist. So a few more moments, let your spine either stay in this still frame or feel a little bit of movement. And it can be almost still movement where you don't really feel an apparent stillness, but you're also not whipping through the movement. You can coach the muscles to hydrate. Right, this might be the only moments that you have that you're really still and conscious in your body and taking it slow. So noticing the moments in practice here. Okay, so we're going to come to the seated pigeon pose, right? So it has all these blends of movement, same blends, it's just that your right foot will be on the floor, pushing down. So when you move to sitting bones, right, you want to keep their, I know that's hard to make them a certain place because they have all this tissue around them. So it's not like they're two hands pushing down. Two sitting bones pushing down have all this other stuff around them. So when you change it up, you might use these bullet points, the foot on the floor in front, the left foot crosses to the right knee. You can lean back, right? You can read a book. You know, and that's the visual I have on this one. Yeah. So as the knee moves open, the left hip for me kind of fires up a bit. I feel a little bit of this in my left leg. And if I hold underneath my right knee and drift a little forward, it's a little more pleasant for me. It feels controlled, I suppose, but it's only if your knee your knee has a like for that. If it's not comforting, then you would rather have your hands back turning out. That's fine too. I see a benefit to both because now I can work on my knee outwards. Okay, but we're gonna go quick into this next pattern. It'll feel quick. So notice how the knee angles are, right? Whether you're holding or you're back and observing. Okay, so the leg extremities generally are longer than the arms, right? And the points of reference are just a couple more. So when you bring your hands either closer to the bolster or you take them off of that right knee, I want you to cross the right foot under the left, so it swings over to the left side, and then your left foot is hooked onto that right knee, and then hopefully you can step into it, right? So it's nice to work on these branches of movement, okay? So now as I hold onto that left shin, and I'm gonna slide it over on the outside of the right leg, and then add a sandbag to the right leg. Yeah, so continue to approach the sand support. And then as you turn to your left, you'll bring the weight into your sitting bones both, flush them out, and then bring that right arm so that flesh turns in the waist. So your mind could jog back to what the side stage was like, and then all these progressive patterns. So the best we can do in our practice probably is to slow down, right? So even slower than we are going here. So feel where your sitting bones are centered. And if the left one is popped up a bit, that's reasonable. But instead of trying to push your left leg into your arm to get your sitting bone down, I want to encourage you to work on that core visceral body sitting upright. And then as you approach the exhale, feel what parts of your waist swing to the left. It might be very minimal that you can get any turning in your rib cage. So resting the eyes so the brain can center, and then you can center on the breath. Great, so filter the air in through the nose, fill the belly. As you exhale, before exiting any of the pose patterns, feel where there's both strength in service to strengthening your spine here. So this is one way to hydrate, right? The vertebral column, the discs, intervertebral discs. Plump them up, you know, to get plump and hydrated. Okay, so when you unwind, take the care to just visualize there's a string on the top of your head. Maybe there is string, there's hair. Okay, so one hair gets really long and pulls you back up when you turn forward. There might be some residual feeling in the left leg here. So stay with that, especially if you feel some firing on the side of the left leg, some heat. And then when you move the sand off, you're going to move the left leg back to pigeon. This leg will be straight back though. So when I lean to my right hip, I'm going to stretch the left side back. I've got my blankets back there this time. And as I turn my flesh of my left side down, I'm going to also rotate so my right foot closes in on the bolster. And then I can move my blocks under my elbows. If you don't like to use your blocks, you can have your arms on the floor. You can put your hands and make a pillow for your forehead. And you can also let the back foot hook the toes under or relax the top of it. Feel all the kind of architectural angles that you play with, right, in the exploration. So sometimes kind of getting into the shape it ripens when you're in the position, not kind of moving. Sometimes stillness is really a gift here. And if you need to move to the left with your blocks or putting your elbows on the floor, that's great. Options are there. Back knee can bend so the heel moves towards your seat. Yeah, begin to cultivate a little interest in beyond that kind of the hip appearance, like the pelvic floor. So noticing if you're gripping into the pelvic, the layer from the inner thigh up, if that area is gripping, you want to try to relax that because you have so many muscle layers moving. You're probably not experiencing prolapse, right? There's a lot of muscles that are toning here. So gripping that won't be helpful. So the left knee may bend, it may stay back down. That's whichever feels okay for your hip and your quad. Give a few more moments. Okay, now kind of ponder the arms here, how they pattern so that we can present a kind of a case to get everything together. So what we want to do is find something that's harmonious and all the layers of the body, muscular, flexibility, have to combine in an instant. So when you lower down the back leg, the footing, bring the blocks, move them a little out to the side. If you like blocks under your palms for downward dog, you might keep them inside your mat. But if you come into down dog and you use things like holding the sides of the mat for your wrist support, you might change it up besides what I mentioned. But we are going to come back for a inverted V pose. So the toes are under left foot. And then as I have my arms open, I'm going to walk them out wide so it doesn't stiffen in my shoulders as greatly. And when I move my ribs center, I'm going to lift up my core. So it's like you're trying to create a cat spine all of a sudden. But you've got these body parts that are kind of hooked in funny places for cat pose. So pull the left thigh up and then move into your hands to push back and bring your right foot back, and your left, of course, is already there. So start to stretch out your calves. So alternate bending your knees. Feel where the roots of the toes combine down to the kind of brick of the ball of the foot, kind of a wide brick across. And then spread the fascia, the plantar fascia, towards the heel. Okay, so what I want you to explore here is what kind of dog pose works for you. What kind of dog? So when you lower your knees, move your bolster far forward, get it away from our arms in the moment. Could be a little closer than that maybe. Okay, so I'm on hands, knees. I got my blanket like this, and I actually sometimes like to do the hands, knees, dog pose with this much height because it brings a little more ease into my hips, but not everyone prefers this extra height. So up to you, okay? And so as the hands spread open, you're gonna round your back into a cat pose. So chin towards the chest. And then reach your spine back. So you're tilting back into almost a child's pose. Take the hands out as wide on the mat as you can reach them open, turn the fingers out, and then move your body forward into up dog so the tops of your thighs lengthen down and the waist stretches forward. So it's a string of pull through the navel center up to the heart. And then come back to table, but instead of situating yourself, I want you to let your body swoop back. So you're alternating. Now this is when you'll probably decide if you want the second blanket or not. If it feels jammed up, then move it away. If it doesn't bother you, you can keep it, of course. Lengthen, alternating forward and back, okay? So take a few more of these, reaching the spine. If you don't want the second blanket, take it away now. You might want to try what you were used to. Or you may like this new idea with 2 blankets. Okay, now last time you come back, stretch out the arms. So reach either one option is the bolster, and your arms lengthen here. And another option for you might be to stretch one arm forward, doesn't matter which one, and slide the other arm under. So left arm forward, right arm swings under the left arm. I stretch my shoulder this way. So if you want to try that, give both sides a good 5 to 10 seconds. Otherwise, the hands on the bolster. So getting the arms stretched out for down dog. Even though you feel like you've done a little bit of that, we're going to do one more. But try to get our arms ready to go for it. Okay, and then as you come back to central station here, hands open off of the bolster, toes under, and reach your hips back, head down. That's the key here, is brain down. So stretch open the palms. If you're holding the sides of the mat, that's fine. And as you reach up your knees, feel the knees lifting up from the shins, and then as the stretch of the heels occurs, let the spine elongate to the floor. So push the floor away. Even if you're slippy sliding, right, you can work on taking your feet wider and still feel that wide stance. So feel if you want a wider step out with your feet or a closer in, and explore this lower belly connection. Breathe. And walk the hands back to your feet. No matter how you ended up with them closer or wider, we're going to step our feet out to the edges of the mat in this forward bend. And then feel when you lower down your head, take the hands to either hold the elbows or the legs and approach the weight of your head down as far as it will dangle on its own without trying to force that. So we get the feel of the arm muscles reaching from the shoulders. And if it's helpful for you to relax the grip on anything with your hands, you can let them dangle down and let the weight of your head stretch. Yeah, feel the back muscles of the legs. Good. Give it a few more moments so that it's almost like a variation of child's pose, but you're not having any weight on your knees. So your torso closes up with the legs. It gets closer. Exhale completely, inverting the body, revitalizing, flushing. Okay, now as you begin to come back to your walking hands and knees pattern, you're going to scoot the feet a little closer. And then hands stretching forwards. Feel where your limit is with that. If you bend your knees like you're moving in towards a little bit of a squat, feel that outstretched sensation of your back. Might feel really nice. Okay. And then when you proceed back forward to your hands, feel the connection of your mid body. And the nice thing about being at home is that you can kind of do kind of funky motions. Like if you're learning to crawl, your rear might kind of bump up and then you fall down and that kind of stuff. So kind of play with it a little bit, and letting the weight saunter from right to left hand is good too. And then when you lower your knees, you're going to sweep your hips back to a child's pose momentarily. So some of us are going to we have more of a sandwich version where our hips move back to our heels. And some it's pretty challenging, right? So your hips are high up. So a moment in time for this grounding. The reason we're doing this is so your head is downwards and your hands are forward, and you're not, your blood pressure was lower from the forward bend. So we want to progress to getting our head back up. So it's more of a caution. It's a preventative pose. Now feel that reach of your hands, and then pull yourself up, but let's slide the left knee forward. Oh, you can slide whatever knee you want to forward to come down. And we'll bring our legs on. Let's see, we got our bolster in front, huh? Okay, this is good. So we got our bolster in the front. So what I want you to place is your seat. Well, put your blankie back. We'll go to what was kind of sort of in my mind stand here. Putting the legs onto the bolster, but it's really the feet right now. You're going to scoot your seat forward, get a belt, lower on your back, feet on bolster, knees pointy up, and take a belt and place it around your ribs. So you're going to kind of have to lift up your rear and slide the belt around on the back space. And then as I lift up my, oh goody, I'll try to figure out where my buckle is. There we go. Okay, so buckle up and then loosen it up quite a bit if it's not a big loop, that is, it depends on your belt. And you're going to put this belt loop under your right foot. Okay, so you want a pretty big loop. I went a little over the top on that loop, but I want you to tighten it down so around your rib cage. So let's see. You know, it's like it's not behind the heart, it's a little lower. But if you kind of hold the rib, the clump of ribs, your rib clump, feel the left knee pointing up. This is essentially important for your back muscles to have that knee up, to kind of massage into the low back. You know, it scoops it. And feel when you push up into that right foot, if you could push into your left foot on the bolster and kind of scoop up, your rear could lift up. So you want to see that you can do that. That's your measurement here on your muscle controlling your pelvis. And then when you lower your spine down, this should be very tight. You know, it should be like your leg can't really wander much. It's pretty restricted. The muscles at the top of the leg are kind of flushing down, right, as you know it in this position. And then as that left leg releases over the bolster, the foot should kind of dangle. It might touch the floor. If it is touching down, I want you to try to get that bolster for this moment. So your left foot is really relaxed. It's not pushing on anything. And then stretch a block overhead. So place your hands on the block wide and reach that block behind you. Okay. So if that's possible for your shoulder joint, if it's not, you pass on the pose. You can pose pass anytime. You can toss the block. Okay. So working the foot to balance the inside of the right thigh. So I'm trying to push up and master the top of my right thigh to be fairly toned, like I'm sucking up the quadricep towards the hip joint. So keep those areas very full. And then notice if you can stay with the right leg as the boss. It's the boss right now. The right leg is your boss. And the left leg is sort of, it's kind of hanging out. It's not quite mature enough to join. Okay, so just let the left leg be. The arms are back, responsible for your shoulders and your upper back to address that area. And then holding the block. Move that block, be sure that you got a good hold on it so it doesn't drop, and bring the block up towards the ceiling. And I try to keep a strong hold. So you notice your leg, your hip joint and your shoulder joint are held captive now, right? They are garnering all your attention. Hip joint, shoulder joints. Okay. So kind of feel how we work with weight bearing right now, even though this doesn't feel like you're lifting a bunch of weights. You're doing some certain work for the bone density right here. Okay, so as your arms go back overhead, I want you to bring the arms so that they kind of help you along. So get a hold of the belt and then start to guide your right leg over to the left. So we're just sliding our foot in the belt over to the left side And now my left leg is kind of rolling a little bit. I'm not so focused on that it should be or shouldn't be a certain way. But one thing you might do is bend the left knee so the left foot is on the bolster. The knee is guided open and bending, externally rotated, but the right hip is also, it's external, but the inside of the leg, you have this both rotations going on. So stretch the right arm open. If the belt is up high on the chest, it doesn't work. So you got to have it kind of on your rib clump. That's such a funny word, clump. It doesn't have a very pleasant visualization for some reason. So when you push into the foot, can you turn your head to the right? Carry on into the shape. Feel the waist turning, but very kindly, if that's a possible word there. Okay, I hope you feel this in your hip. Some hip sensation. And if you want to keep the legs straight up, you can also keep it up. Bend the right knee. Okay. Feel as you push the foot to the ceiling and all the muscles, not all of them, but there's vibrancy in the upper kind of circuitry of the leg. So try to feel the resistance with the belt on the back and the leg. And then when we bring the left knee to point up, we're going to take the left knee pointing out, foot on the bolster, and the right leg open. This might be the easier pattern for you than the crossover, especially if you've got some, patterns in the knee that are tense. Some people will find that the external rotation, when they're in a relaxed atmosphere, is a little bit less pressurized in the hip. So they're different positions, but important to try them all, right? So you have nice benefit for the circulation in the joint. Now this would be one I have to be a little careful of my back muscles. So to be honest with you, what might be good is to have a little bit of something under your left thigh, because I'd rather have us be here for a good, 45 seconds to a minute. And if you can't quite muster up the happiness to be with that, you might need something under your left leg. It could be a ball, could be a block. Okay, so feel the inner leg circulation. That's clear. So now we've done one side. So you feel like you focused on the right side for this event. Okay, now in between sides, we're going to take legs up. So you're going to slide the right foot back straight out. You're going to bend the knee and slide the belt off the foot. You got this belt stuck under you still. Bring the knees pointing up, push into your feet, lift up the hips, put a block either low or mid height under your sacrum. And the back of the pelvis is fine as well, so that's lower. And you choose and lift the legs up. And one's going to feel longer than the other, that's for certain after that event. You'll probably notice even a little tone difference, even with your clothes on. You probably notice a little different wrinkle in the fabric, perhaps, or make some wrinkles. So they happen. So you feel the leg and feeling the awareness of that right thigh lifting up, the left thigh trying to gain control. And let the inversion simply happen. See if you can let go of too much comparative processing right here. Just be. Observe what would benefit you right now to bring balance. That's a heavy question. Okay, now the knees have to bend, I think, to get off of your block. So you got to bend your knees, put your feet on the bolster, push, and slide the block away. So you've still got that nearby. As your spine kind of rocks its way back down, I lift up my left leg and I put the belt under the foot and go straight up. I imagine your intensity on the belt might differ from one side to the other. So keep in mind, we're trying to bring balance. So it's not a comparative game as much as being rather disciplined on doing the right thing. Like this is the right thing to get balance if the sides are a little different, you know. Whether it's really different or not, just give your focus right here to the position. So the right leg could relax, the left leg is pushing up. It's got to push to spread the back of the pelvis and all. So you've got to actually put some energy into the foot. If you feel up to it, you get to bring the arms out. Now this time we have cactus arms versus block overhead. So feel if your elbows are loaded, and then feel where your rib cage moves with the response of the inhale and the out breath. Right foot up onto the bolster, right foot slides in so the thigh turns out, and then the left leg crosses to the right. Okay, so a little more captivating, right, than dropping a foot on a leg on a bolster, right, since you're tied up. So you're pushing with that resistance, and if you really like that resistance point of focus, see what you can do with what you've got versus adding the belt intensity, like tightening it up. See what you can do with the reality that you're given with your circulation. You know, my right foot doesn't really like being on the bolster, so I have to kind of slide it up there so I can keep connected and relaxed. So do what feels comfortable for your right leg. That might be the most important part, is the right leg is a base. Okay, stay with it a little longer, final spinal here coming up. So the left knee is a little bendy. It's a bend knee. Bendy knee. So bend that left knee a little bit, micro bend, and then try to go slow to the other side. So what we're going to is the external rotation. And you can go micro motion slow. I know patience doesn't necessarily enter the room on this pose, but feel if you can go slow and then maybe pick up the slide and move that left leg out. But the right foot is on the bolster, knee is pointed out. So now when I come out with this left leg, I'm going to put something under my right leg. It could be a ball and it could be a block. The ball seems too small. The block is a little better. So I want to find some support. And hey, you might notice the left leg is too high for you. It's pulling up. So you could always loosen up the belt. Now, if you loosen it up, guess what? You get more stretch and it's a little more intense. So we are going right into pelvic floor, intermediate work coming up. And so this inner leg musculature doesn't need to be overstretched, but it will be particularly interesting if you have a good stretch there for bridge pose. After legs up. Now feel the right knee open, back of the pelvis, trying to stay centered. So use the left hand and then bring yourself back on up with the left leg. And, you know, we got to do this leg up though without the belt under the legs for this version. So when I take that right knee center, I push down into my feet. If you don't like the belt around you, you can always take it off. And then lift up your hips and push down either on the floor with your feet or on the bolster. Now don't make it like you have to use your bolster for these bridge poses. It gives a little more length in the spine. I think it's true, but some people don't like that cushion under their feet. So when you swing the knees up, feel that you're lifting your hip bones. Well, they're being lifted by the block. And once you use the block, really kind of have a mentality of using the prop. to support and negotiate a lift. And then feel the difference if there's any balance that came from the last thing you did. I hope you feel like each side got some even circulation and kind of extra juice, extra lift. It's very obvious when you do one side, but when you've done both, it's a little more balance. Okay, circle the feet, give them some rotational energy, both directions. Kind of like their little wings, right? Kind of flowing out and pushing and circling. I know it seems interesting if we can get a sandbag up there. It's tempting, huh? We'll wait till the end. Okay, now bend through the legs. So as you feel that crease in the knees, feel the lift of your back right now. This block did the work. Okay, so I encourage you to try going into bridge pose this way. This is the way of going into bridge from a shoulder stand version, right? So this would be the drop down from the lift up. So what you'll try for is to move a one leg down at a time. And the bolster could be really nice for this bridge education. So I'm going to use my bolster under my feet. You can have your feet on the floor too. It's a personal choice. So once you get to this layer, can you accommodate your back muscle needs by letting the block be at the right height for your back? Medium or low is fine. You might even lower it down and feel. Feel the musculature in the front of the pelvis. You could even touch to the hip bones. And likely bone touching, it's like it feels like it's just, they don't have the same visceral connection than when you touch like the connective tissue, and they have a different vibrancy, right? They're just bones. So when you push down though, you're trying to use all your muscle collaboration to strengthen them. So I want you to push down to your feet and then lift up your hips way higher than the block. I mean, it's probably not quite double height, but it feels like you're doing that. So feel this, the squeeze of the glutes. They certainly kind of motion in, right? And they grapple for supporting your back. So slide the block away and bring your arms overhead. Lower your spine, but the arms stay overhead. Now scoop the tailbone so you have a tail drawing under, and then lengthen out your spine. Good. Now once you feel that spine length, maintain the feet touching to the bolster or the floor. Feel that equal pressure with your legs. And then add a ball or a block between the knees. Either is fine. Okay, block would be narrow. That's important for this one. So I actually have my block a little bit lower than between my knees, to be honest. So you might try variations with that to work on the pelvic floor, but it just seemed the right position. So as I move my arms straight back as if they have some claim to fame in the position they're reaching. And then as I lift up the hips again, now instead of tightening around the glutes, the buttock muscles, they're already activated, but when I lift up my hips, I'm squeezing the block, okay? So this time as you bring your arms towards the ceiling, I want you to shrug your shoulders like you're trying to lift them up towards the ceiling. Inhale. And then exhale, shoulders down or so. And then lower your hands down as your hips stay up, palms down, shoulders, and then palms open, shoulders back. Lower down through the spine. Think all spine here. So spine wave down. Okay, now what we're building ourselves up for is we're going to continue drawbridge. So you're going to lift your arms this time as your hips lift up. But the mental frame is that we're actually preparing our body for an inversion. That's all we're going to be up to right now. We're going to get towards that good 5-minute legs up. So I want you to prepare the lining of the sides of the spine right now even though that lift up is pretty minor for most of us, right? It feels pretty small. I want you to prepare so that when it gets there, when we get there, we're actually also opening our chest too. So the next time you lift up, I know we're all at a different pace right now, lifting and lowering, but next time you find that lift up, feel how the feet have to kind of shove into the ground. And what happens when you start to get to fatiguing here, tiring out. Okay, now when you center down all the way through the spine, next time all the way down, remove the block or ball and take the right leg up, cross it over the left leg and move the knees to the right. If you want something under that right leg, you could put a ball or block, but you're stretching this IT band on the left side of the leg. So left arm could be open. It's nice to feel this left side of the belly button up into the rib clump. Hopefully I never remember that line again. It evaporates. Now can you let the abdomen move with the breath? Even if you're with kind of this grippy crossover. Knees move back into center. And uncross, arms open, windshield wiper the legs. Not so much necessarily a feet positioning, but the feet are wide on the bolster or the floor and knees swing side to side. Also the hips roll side to side with the chest open. Left leg crosses over the right and swing the knees to the left. Yeah. Feel the waist, feel the thigh. Notice what part of your back is lifted. This is going to be the part of the back lifted on the bolster. Okay, so you want to let the spine be warmed up to achieve that without any challenge, right? So it's comfortable for the back, the whole ray in the back. So with the equal in and out breath. Yeah, if one side is very different than the other and you need something under the legs on that left side, a ball, a block, use it. You've got the props out, use them. So taking the emphasis into the openness of the arms, a few moments. Now with the pelvis kind of pressurized on one side and weight bearing on the other, right? So it's kind of clamoring for a little bit of fluidity. I want you to bring your knees back center and uncross, hold on to the kneecap and circle the knees to massage the outer rim of the sacrum. And the back should be pretty nicely warmed up to come into legs up the wall. So you might decide when you roll to the side, you want to move your arms forward and stretch your legs. You might have some things you need to do to accommodate your body's response right now. But in general, you might feel comfortable rolling to a side and use your arms to help you lift and sit. And then take your bolster or a blanket stack. Either is fine to a wall. You don't have to use the bolster. You don't even have to use anything under your pelvis. You could use a block. So there's a few options with that variation. And if you're going to do a chair shoulder stand, this would be a good time to set that up if you want to get a little bit of a higher inversion, a little higher, basically. So it would equate to that in the mind. So when I have my stand nearby, I'm going to sit on my bolster or the blankets And then put my rear as close to the wall and be on one side of that height that's next to the wall. One side, you're going to be on one side or you'll flip onto the other off of it. So lower down your chest, and then you can feel when you swing the legs up that you're almost to the wall. You might not get your seat to the wall sometimes. It's essential to get the legs up, even if your seat isn't to the wall. So relax that ambition. Sometimes it's nice to learn this one without my seat like purposely at the wall. Sometimes I'll pull the bolster a little higher up, and then my seat is kind of between the wall and the bolster, and it's not really the same exact feeling, but it's more chest opening. So this is one variation that's taught often. And this is classic focus of chest and rib cage opening. So you could do this one, you could have your ball or block in between the bolster and the wall, or you could go the basic classic. This to me is what I like to feel is very supported. And then add your sand to your feet. So you have sandy feet. With the sandbag and its support, lift the sand, then push your feet up and try to separate the heels a little bit at the wall so you have enough space. And you know, the back of the legs very recently had all this formation of movement and specific detailing. So you might find some enjoyment in little micro bend of the knees, just the mildest amount. And then the weight of your brain heavy, and the shoulders maybe need, for some of you, a little roll at the base of the neck so that the jaw, right, feels a little bit more openness. You can play with the blanket support. It's not a bad idea. Some are going to be educated to have almost no blanket support. So decide for you, if it feels like this blanket is almost kind of giving you an adjustment and a little bit of a pull for the amount of time provided, it could be a success for your overall consideration in your nervous system, right? And if this is too bulky, but you still want that roll, you can just kind of make it a little smaller. So it's like a mini version of it until your neck can actually soften. It takes the moment to separate the chest with the arms out and let your head find a centering experience with the weight of your pelvis on the bolster or blankets. Feel the lift of the belly with the in-breath. Try to find your shape that you're working towards and relax your breath. Feel the inner landscape, but also the directions of your scanning from your legs and that waterfall effect of rejuvenating and revitalizing the circulation to the heart and the brain. So think of this as it's a vascular pose, right? This is really a pose to focus on the vascular system, making an impression on your internal arrangements here, relaxing the organs from gravity's downward pull. And simply be present for your practice, for everyone's practice here. And with a few more moments, you have the hips balancing and pressing a little bit into the bolster. Now, as your legs begin to shift, how they're being supported, which they are being supported by the wall, but as you bend your knees, I want you to flow the legs distant from the wall enough that you can soften and then feel the legs lower down towards your torso. And if you safely can let your sandbag toss overhead, you might do that, or move the sand with your hands to the side. And then find that cobbler's pose again. Feel the knees open, feel the hands move to the upper inner thigh. Feel the spine stretching. And if you have a rolled up blanket, this is a good time to flatten that out. And still feel that circulation in the neck. Now, with that quality of movement through your hips and the pelvic turned upside down, bring the knees together. And then as you let your body guide into that full spine stretch, turn and let the body roll to the side and find where you turn, that the hands lower and help you come up and find a sitting position, either with your back at the wall or sitting on a blanket, and feel where the leg either crossing or diamonding. It could be in a diamond shape as well. If you choose to have your feet a little closer, spend some energy with the movement of the ribs forward and the chest lifting. Okay, and then find what would be a simple balance for you, maybe crossing at the ankles and elevating your arms up to join your hands in front of the heart, letting the brain bow into your heart center. Surrender here. Gather your attention to the space behind your heart. Let's unite our breath and hold the presence and the slow in breath and out breath.